G'day, this is Jamie at the church vineyard, the Lord's vineyard. And I have a couple of things I'd like to go over to help things be smoother at picking time. And first of all, I wanted to go over a little paper etiquette. When you come up to a bundle of papers, first of all, this bundle should not be outside of the end post. It should be on the inside of the end post. Because anything outside here and any personal items, pans or whatever, need to stay in here so that they don't get driven over and ruined. Or if I'm running the water truck, then I have to stop and move them out of the way. But to open up a bundle of papers, either one that's been previously used or ones that the brand new and has the straps on it, you have a knife because you're out here picking. So use the knife to cut the old tape. Because then you can open the paper up to get out what you need, and rather than ripping the papers open, because I need to keep these covers intact so that I can reuse them for rewrapping unused picking papers. And again, when you are done with your assignment and you're picking up all the loose papers on your row, they need to be put back into a nice neat stack like this, nice and neat that you would want to use them later on. And I'll have duct tape here after harvest, and you rewrap them up into bundles to be able to save them for next year's use. On every bunch of grapes, on the stem, there will be a bulge, a little swelled place. If you, when you're cutting, will cut on that bulge rather than below it or above it, it'll snap almost like a carrot. You can almost do it with your thumbnail. But if you cut below that, it'll be woody and be hard to do. See, like here's a bulge here too. If you cut on those, then it comes apart real easy. The other thing I want to point out is the difference between premature raisining, which is okay to put in the pan and then also on one of the paper trays, and what is rot. As you can see, these are just already made into raisins, just premature drying. Whereas this is rot. There was either a bug that got in there and ate one of the berries, or because the bunch was really tight and one of the berries split, and once you had that juice in there, then it rotted from the inside out. We don't want to put any of this on the tray. So if there are good parts that you can cut off to put in your pan, that's okay. But I don't want any of this rot stuff on there. And it'll have a vinegar smell to it. And there will be a lot of times fruit flies or other bugs in there. And I mean, try and save what you can. So the rest of this, just take, and there will be a little trough here in the row. Put it there and kick some dirt over it. If we leave it up on the vine, it'll inoculate and make more spores and cause more problems later on. So we want to bury it, and then it'll get rid of it and won't cause us future problems with rot. So regarding any of the rot that you might find, if you wouldn't be willing to eat it, don't put it on the paper tray because somebody else may not want to eat that either. So also we want to make it clear that this nice smooth terrace that's been laid here is supposed to keep nice and smooth. It's not a nice sidewalk for people to walk down the middle of. And it's made smooth like that so that in case we do have rains, that it'll cause it to run off the papers. That angle also helps it to be able to dry another day or two faster, just having that slight angle to the sun. But if you do come across a place that has a footprint, just take your pan or even your hand and smooth it out before you would put a paper on top of it. Because if it does rain, or even if we have heavy dews, condensation will form there and cause the berries to rot where that dip or depression is from the footprint. Also, when you're picking, you pick from this side here and lay down to the north. you don't go over here and pick these, because if you're walking over here to pick these, you're most likely stepping on a place where the people need to lay their papers down. So you only pick from the one side, and you want to pick thoroughly. That means sometimes you have to reach way back in there and get the bunches that are on the far back of the vine. We probably leave on any given year 15 to 20% of the crop still just hanging there on the vine because somebody didn't reach far enough under there to get it. When you're picking, you want to pick thoroughly, and you want to, aside from cutting on the bulge, you want to cut away from yourself rather than towards yourself, because often, probably 90-95% of the cuts we get out here are people are cutting towards themselves. They're not cutting on the bulge, and so they're pulling, and when it finally gives, then that's when they get sliced. So if you'll grab the bunch or the stem and cut away from yourself, and sometimes when they're really jammed in here, you have to do a surgical removal to get everything. I like to keep my pans underneath where I'm picking, so any berries individual loose berries that fall will drop into the pan. And periodically as you're picking, you want to remove the leaves. We don't want leaves on the tray because they'll shade the berries and make them take longer to dry. So you don't have to have out every leaf, but try and get most of the leaves taken out. Periodically as you're going along, sometimes the bunches will fall on the berm. It's really okay to use these still. Pick them up and put them back in the tray. If you have individual berries that are lying around, that's not necessarily a problem, but if you have bunches, obviously pick up the bunches. You don't have to pick up every single berry, but as many of these we can put on the paper tray and send to the packer. They'll get put in a box to go feed the poor and the needy. So once you have a slightly heaping pan, that'll probably be about the right amount to put on a paper tray. And rather than just putting paper trays right out in front of you, sometimes if the terrace doesn't look very good there, don't put the paper trays there. Put them down a little bit farther when it does smooth out. Also, I see a lot of people that will put out the papers ahead of time, and they'll lay down like 100 feet of papers all spread out. I wouldn't advise that, number one, because I don't think there's that much crop here unless we get some divine intervention, but also because within a few minutes before you can even get to the rest of those papers, you'll probably be playing Keystone Cops and chasing those papers down the road because the wind is going to blow them all over the place. So just put out papers as you need them to put the grapes on. So then carry the pan down to the place where you have a good terrace. And by the way, those are toad traps. Put out your paper. You want the paper as high on the terrace as possible so that the upper lip of it hangs over the edge. And especially if you have a bulge up at the top of the paper or at the top of the terrace, you want to put the paper actually up on top of the bulge. Like this bulge here, you want the paper so it's up above the bulge. If you have that paper down here, just the vibration of people walking by, sand is going to come and settle on the paper. And then that sand, when it touches the grapes, will be, as they wrinkle, start making the wrinkles, it'll wedge the dirt and sand in between the wrinkles. So as much as possible, we don't want dirt or sand on the paper trays. If you'll take and put some bunches down at the bottom to make kind of a trough at the bottom to catch any loose berries that fall off when you dump. And then spread it around so that they're only one bunch thick. You don't want bunches on top of bunches. And it's okay if there's a few open places. You don't want the grapes hanging off the tray like that, because then again, those berries will be in direct contact with the dirt. As they start making wrinkles, it'll wedge the sand and dirt in the wrinkles. So there should be a little border around the edge with no grapes on it at all. Probably several times a day I get asked, what's the difference? Is it the paper supposed to be creased down or crease up? It doesn't matter. However you think it will lay down easier, do that. It doesn't matter whether it creases up or down. So keep it up high, keep the trays uniform. Don't have 2 bunches on this one and 2 pans on the next one, and this thick. Make them uniform all the way down, and then they'll dry more evenly, and you'll be able to, when you do the rolling, it'll be more uniform quality at the rolling time also. No job is done until the paperwork is finished. So there needs to be somebody in charge of that row to count the paper trays and then write them on the end post on the card here, and the date that it was picked, because that'll be important to know for when it comes time for rolling. It's important to come by and pick up all your equipment and the extra papers in the row, and again, come back and neatly stack them in the bundle, and we'll have duct tape that we can tape up the bundles again. This crop that's sitting out here is it's worth a lot of money, and so we need to be very careful to pick thoroughly, to pick everything that's there and reach back for that last bunch, because we've got over $1 million worth of raisins sitting out here on this farm, probably $5,000 or more on every row, and so it would be very easy to leave several $100 or even $1,000 on a row unpicked, because we just wouldn't reach back far enough for them. Last of all, remember what this is all for. It's to help the poor and the needy, and maybe even some of us. And that while you're working here, that I hope you feel the Spirit of the Lord, because as Jesus taught, if you do these unto the least of these, you've done it unto me.